So I think the little routine that we're entering into is that Subdeacon Stoyan is helping me by coming up with an outline and moving forward in the Catechism series. I love being here. I am very busy and I do need help. And so it's been wonderful for him to have the time to sit back and think about the things that we've said, look at the season that we're in, and make a proposal to me. And we'll probably stick with this routine for a while where he will make the predominant presentation on a topic, which tonight we're going to talk about fasting. And then I will give a little bit of input at the end based on my own reflections during the talk. So Subdeacon Stoyan, please come forward. Thank you for being here. Bless the Lord be upon you. He's a good Slav. He gets a blessing before everything.
I'm not too obedient, but I try.
Yeah.
It's a learning process for
You
me.
can act obedient. It's a good start.
Well, dear Father Thaddeus, and truly beloved my Orthodox family, if anything, I got to realize in the past 8 months and the past month after I started, sharing. I don't want to say teaching because I'm learning too, but being here with you, I think it's not. I think, but it is the most really beautiful thing to be with each other, support each other, and that's something that has been missing for me, especially in the past year or two. It does make a difference to have that Christian moral support. We need it more than ever, especially nowadays.
Amen.
So Father Thaddeus already said that we will be talking about the fasting, but before, I would like to start with something prior to a little, not life example, things that most of us have done, and then we're gonna dive into the fasting. I'm sure most of you might have not tried, but you will be aware to remember you're in the river, swimming, especially in the river, fast river, the current, when you go in the opposite direction, obviously you're fighting with the current, even like in the ocean. That's the last thing you want to be, but it's not an easy thing. But, when you're there, you're trying to survive. You have to. So, you don't really end up somewhere else. So, to be a Christian means also going against the current. It is really, especially nowadays, but remember, it is not a bad thing at all. That's how it should be, because it's making us stronger. So, going back to the centuries, the current will never stop until the end of the world. There's times it's stronger, there's times it's not, but it's always there. And especially nowadays, and we all know, we live in a time that it's so strong that we really have to survive. But that's how we also see how strong we are. And as says in the gospel, when you separate the gold from the silver, or the gold from what is from the pure and not pure. So through the tribulations, we do see how strong we are, the faith. That's why we had even the Ecumenical Council, all these tribulations in the beginning up until the 10th centuries, even before, but especially in the beginning. So I just wanted to start off with the current and just to say that we are going through against the current as Christians, but don't be afraid, because it's part of life and it's a beautiful thing. So struggles are making us stronger. If everything is good, then something is wrong. So before I start about the fasting, I also want to say or talk about the waiting. When you think of the fast, or when I think of the fast or fasting, I think of waiting. What I mean by that is, imagine, when we're fasting, let's say Pascha, it's a 48 days, so you're preparing and you're waiting, so something is coming and you're doing something, and the fruit of what you have done is the resurrection, is the joy. For the nativity is the same. So that even in our lives, you're waiting for something, you're sacrificing yourself, and then after that, here's the reward. So you're receiving. So each of us need to pass through a time of preparation. No matter through what, but specifically we're talking about the fast. So there has to be preparation. And at last, our expectations will be fulfilled. Without this waiting, without the expectant preparation, the deeper meaning of what we have been fasted for will be lost. So that preparation is preparing us for something that we're about to, to receive. But and if there's no preparation, we're losing the meaning. It's not what it should be. So speaking of fasting or the fast, it's a huge topic. We can spend the entire semester. It's really, there's so much to cover, and 1-2 hours are not enough, really. So I'm not going to go in the chronological or the history of the fast, but I'm going to focus more on the spiritual parts, kind of, from the surface, in terms of today, how we can apply the fast as individuals, and through loving each other, and we'll be talking as along the lecture. What is fast? The simple explanation we can say it's abstinence, nothing else but just abstinence. And what is abstinence? The first fast we find and where it came from is from Adam and Eve in the garden of in the paradise, when they were created. So when God told them, eat from everything but not except from that tree, it was a fast. Obedience, so those two things are really important to understand, the obedience and the fast. So it's not about really fasting from food. It is important, but it's more than that. Disciplining yourself, disciplining your body, your thoughts. So the best definition of what fast is will be abstinence, the abstaining from something. Also, fast is an expression of love. In my research, I read it somewhere, and I didn't think about it too much up until when I was, reading about it, and it is true. It's more than, of course, we fast for God, but it's also expression of love. What kind of love? Showing our love to our Creator. So you're sacrificing yourself. You're taking something out of yourself. As I believe in some of the Holy Father said, basically it has to be, you should give 10% of yourself. Not literally, metaphorically speaking, giving to God. So fasting is one of the ways you can give to God. Because we can never, we're thankful, but we can never give, back to God for what He has done to us and He's still doing. But at least if anything we can do we can do for Him, at least through living pious life, helping each other and fasting, which is the biggest benefit we can get as individuals and bring closer to God. So again, another way to explain the fast is expression of love to our Creator, to our God. Also, it is a love for our neighbor. That's another thing we have to really remember. And I didn't even think about it myself up until I was doing my research and reading about it too. How and why? Fasting involves the way we treat other people. It involves practical compassion, helping the oppressed and giving food to those who are hungry, taking the homeless into our houses. So the true fast, it's not just a question of food, but it involves our relationship to our fellow humans. Just like Apostle John says, you cannot love God how can we love God whom we have never seen, but we see our neighbors on a daily basis, and doesn't really make any sense. So those two things we can definitely connect to the fast. You gotta fast towards our neighbors, and loving and helping. That's another way of disciplining ourselves and showing love and sacrificing ourselves for our neighbors. So when you think of the fast and in general of the spiritual life, like I said, I'm talking in general. I'm not going the history. Maybe we might cover later. So it's more like general picture of the fast. There's three things we have to really keep in mind as Orthodox Christians, which are bearing in mind the prayer, fasting, and the almsgiving, which are the works of mercy. I really think those three are the fundamental things that will bring us closer to Christ, and there's something we can give. If anything we miss as Orthodox Christians, and I got to realize myself in the past few years, and just being in America and coming from other countries, we really do miss that helping everybody. We all love God, but when it comes to help others, it's something that I really feel like we're missing. I've seen this in the Orthodox in America. Like I had to say, the converts, people who are new to the Orthodoxy. Like I said, I've seen two worlds, and if anything, I learned, and from people who are new to the Orthodoxy, they do pay attention to the almsgiving, and it's a wonderful thing to see how much they sacrifice, and we're missing people, especially from those Orthodox countries. I do think that we're lacking that. We can love God all day long. We can say, hi, how are you? But you're not going to help. Our actions will help. And even for me, I don't, really talk about myself, but the most beautiful thing for me is to give out of yourself. That's, in my country, we say the hand that gives never dries up. When you give, that's really the most beautiful thing. The more you give, the more is given to you. And it's not something that I read, but something that I got to feel, to experience in my life. And so those three things are really important: the prayer, the fasting, and the almsgiving. As Christ himself says, these spirits are cast out only by prayer and fasting. Those are really two important things that you can fight, and I don't even think about it. I mean, we love God, but the prayer, sometimes when you think about it, but when you have to pray, how much really focused we are, or when you fast, how much focus we are on fasting. It's easy to talk about it. When you have to really be practical into it, it's not easy. But those two things really are the biggest and strongest weapon that we can fight against the evil, and all the evils in this world. So again, those three things, like I said, the prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, which are the works of mercy. We could say that Lent or fasting, it's all about the renewal of personal relations. We are renewing our personal relation with God through prayer. We are renewing our personal relation with ourselves and with our own bodies through fasting, of course. We are renewing our relationship with our neighbor, with our fellow humans through almsgiving, through acts of compassion. So when you see the connection, prayer, fasting, almsgiving, it's also, it has to come, through the neighbor. It's individual, on the spiritual level, and on the physical. And when you really combine those three, and it has to become a lifestyle, of course, then I do believe will get us somewhere on the right path, on the narrow one, which is supposed to be, but ultimately will lead us to Christ, hopefully, by the grace of God.
Amen.
So speaking of fast, like I said, there's a lot to be said. And another thing that I wanted to mention is, why do we fast? Which I will talk later on about it. But now I want to say, we have to fast with not only with we have to fast with our mouth, our eyes, our ears, our thoughts, our actions, with our love. And so those are really important things that you can't just do one but neglect the other. So what you see, what you hear, what you think, how much you love are really, really important things. So it's not only, maybe it sounds hard when you try to think, you get scared, but when you try to combine everything and put your body into just, you focus on one way, one direction, that's when you try to make all the organs of your body work and focus on that. And also there's some of you might have heard Saint Basil the Great says, if you eat your brother but you're fasting, it's really pointless. So you do not eat meat but you eat your brother. What's the point? That's a very famous saying by Saint Basil. And as Apostle Paul says too, you can fast, but if you eat your brother and do other things and you abstain from food, it doesn't really help. It's better for you to eat meat and drink than to fast. And that's the hardest. It's really the hard. To ask forgiveness even when you know you're right, but to humble yourself, for me it's hard. I was worse. Now, I see my weaknesses, how really hard it is even to say forgive me, out of our ego and our pride. And recently I was talking to my roommate, my brother in Christ, and I had somebody that's, I unfortunately, we had a little conflict, and he is wrong, I'm not saying out of pride, but and I talked to him like, even if you are, still humble yourself, go. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, it's I haven't done it yet, but it's so hard. So speaking of the fast, I can really see to humble yourself and to go in and to say forgive me, just to establish that love toward the others, even if they hate you. That's really the pinnacle, the pinnacle. Because we see Christ through somebody's face, to our neighbor. I see Christ in you, you see Christ in me. And again, it's the hardest thing, but it's a learning process. I'm learning myself. So the fast we choose, when we fast, I'm not going to talk really how to fast because I'm not a priest. Father Tadius is the one who would say that. But in general, what I can say, it's really important you can't just choose when you fast. You really have to follow not the rules, but the teaching of the guidance of the church that has given to us. And there's reason why, because if everybody does as they want, it's going to be just a disorder. So you have to follow a certain pattern, one way. So I do believe that people struggle, especially in a modern or the Western world, people do struggle to fast in fasting. And I think the reason why is because we're doing in our own way. Something that I really got to realize that, I was talking last time, one of the lectures, we like to negotiate, that's why it's really important that, to have a spiritual father or somebody who can, nobody's expecting us to fast. The rules are, the guidance are here for us, but, we don't want to overwork our body or really do something that we can damage in our body. So everything within the rights, with the blessing of the spiritual father and the economia, each of us are different. And that's really, important to, not to do in our own way, but to do in the ways the church is teaching us, or, from the spiritual father. And something that I find interesting, in terms of, the choosing to fast on your own, I think of the words of the Russian theologian Alexis. In the 19th century, he was a theologian, so he wrote the following: when anyone falls, he falls alone, but no one is saved alone. We are saved in the communion of the church. Now that's true of fasting, as of all aspects of the Christian life. No one is saved alone. To be a Christian is to be a member of a family. Really good point. So to be, it's not just be on your own. Be a part of something. Christ was obedient to his Father. So you have that thing from not only historical, but thing that Christ gave to us. So being member of family. To be a Christian is to be a member of a family. I really thought that was very interesting. The Christian is the one who has sisters and brothers. After the family, which you are, we have brothers and sisters. So that applies also in fasting. And it is much easier to fast in a total community around your fasting as well. So to have that support, we all do fast, but when you think how difficult it is, always have that moral support. That's why we're here as a community. We help each other, we struggle each other. And the priest, is the captain of the boat. In the church is depicted as a boat, into the world with all these storms. And God gave him to us, the priesthood, the bishops in the church, where he is leading us and helping us towards the salvation through the guidance. He has to guide us and all the communities, one family. When I am in the monastery, that's what I'm just quoting him. When I'm in the monastery, I belong to the monastery. In the monastery, we're keeping the fast. So when you're in the monastery, you have the brotherhood. So when everybody fasts, you're following the same. So it's it's easy. It's easy. It's hard to. I feel it's hard to go astray because you're here. If you think you're falling, the other brother's gonna catch you, just like in a family. So that's why having somebody it's very, very important. You don't have to think about it. It's here. So you have that support. Unfortunately, in our Western society, if we're living and working with non-Orthodox, there's the challenge, we have to debate rather carefully in ourselves how we're going to keep the fast. And actually, in the times of fasting, we tend to think more about food than we do at other times. So I feel like it's become more about the food. And then he was talking about an example that if you're like auto economia, if you're somebody, let's say you invite me to your house and you're non-Orthodox, so if you really took your time, and imagine I tell you, oh, I'm sorry, I'm fasting, I'm gonna make it worse for you and more temptation. Sometimes auto economia, it's really better to eat what's given to you. But to prevent that, if you're really in such situation, if you're not, so there's another thing he was talking about that, imagine like, if you have the opportunity, escape, there's a dinner tonight, once you're there, and if somebody prepared for you, it's better just to kind of keep it quiet and so you don't offend them. Because that's another showing Christian love, even without them knowing. We can protect ourselves, at least we don't have to, there's some events, so if we know that, that is going to be obstacle or stumbling block for them, then it's better for us not to show up or just find a way so you don't really go, so you don't, make anybody, think about or just, judge you or whatever. That's, so which is really, it's a logical thing. So you really have to look things living in a world, that we live today. That's, but that's again the family, the brother and sister concept. I think it's very important when you apply with in everything, but in this case, with fasting. So the fasting rules of the Orthodox Church, like I said, especially like coming from Orthodox world, it's much more strict back home than here. And sometimes you have that idea, you come here and then people start judging each other. That's normal. I don't want to say normal, but you'll find that extremes from both sides. But we have to, of course, moderation is everything, but there's rules we have to follow. After all, we have the spiritual father. If we have difficulties, it takes time. If anything I've learned, I'm learning from people who are newly to the Orthodoxy, one of the biggest struggles are the fasting. But it's hard. It's like I've been doing since I was 13 years old. So for me, I don't even think about it. I don't know how spiritually how much I fast, but with food, I'm okay. But seeing people, the newly, I can see that for a lot of people it's struggle. So that's why we do our best, and we don't want to do on our own. But if somebody is really struggling, we do have to reach out to the spiritual father and see what is the best for us. And baby steps. Like if anything, I realize again, baby steps for everything. They're the best and safer. So one of the rules that I would just like to briefly mention is, not the rules, just the fasting periods are, so we have the non-fasting periods, the weekly fast, and there's some exceptions to the rules, as always, communion fast, the Lenten fast, the Apostles' fast, the Dormition, and the Nativity fast. And the ones, there's 3 out of the year, which is just one day fast. The eve before the Theophany, on the Theophany, St. John the Baptist, the September 11th and the 27th of September for the exaltation of the Holy Cross. Now I would like to say a little bit about the spiritual fast. I did mention earlier the key, the foundation for the fast that Christ himself told us, and the biggest weapon we can have and he has given to us are his words where he says, "These spirits are cast out only by prayer and fasting." This is the biggest, I think, you can't really get here more than that. And we have the example in the New Testament, the apostles tried to heal one of the demon-obsessed young men, and they couldn't. And when Christ, they asked him why we couldn't do that. And he said, this, what is the word? We can only, can you paraphrase in English? This human race, you can only win with a prayer and fasting. Mm-hmm. So those are the strongest, again, the strongest 2 things we can fight against. Back home when I was in a seminary, we had a practice. Like I said, it's much strict back home. So when any Lent will come, especially the Great Lent, we're like 90 kids in the high school seminary. And before the Lent, we had, and I'm sure there's still the tradition that on the Forgiveness Sunday, only the retired priest, they will come to a couple of them to the seminary, and after the forgiveness, service, we have that tradition. Even if you don't like the person, you have to go and ask, forgive me, brother. It's even like sometimes, like we're kids, you will not talk to somebody, but if anything, you have to, make the peace on Forgiveness Sunday or before the land. And they'll come and, they'll do confession, general prayer, then, we're gonna go individually. So, we're not forced to do confession, but that's, most of us was the first kind of introducing encounters with a confession. So, you have to do confession, then we'll have general, we'll take communion. Those parts of the, back home. And also, people do that like on the first week of the Great Lent, on the Saturday, St. Theodore Saturday, like, it's like, people will take communion, like, it's all the tradition, people do that. Something I would like to, speaking of the struggles of the fast, living in an unorthodox country, it's really hard and a challenge. Living in the Orthodox country, it's much easier because you're surrounded by your own people. When it's Sunday, it's Sunday. The bells are ringing. The stores are closed. It's Sunday. That's another thing I miss. Over here, you don't feel it's Sunday. It depends where you are. But over there, it's Sunday. So life is, a little easier because, you people with the same belief, same faith. But here, and you will know, we all live here. It is a struggle, and so another way how we can not protect, but like a little consolation. There's a Mother Gavrila. It's a book, Ascetic of Love. It's in the biography of the Mother Gavrila. This is what she is talking about. So Mother Gavrila of blessed memory, she spent much time traveling in the service of Christ to places that separated her from the daily liturgical life of the church. She was a nun. It's even harder being in the world and fasting and keeping the faith. Especially during these times, the advice of her spiritual father, Archimandrite Lazarus, he wrote her a letter. She was asking him, how can I, it's hard, how can I fast, how can I get through? So this is what he wrote to her. Fasting is one of our greatest weapons against the evil one. I will repeat, that's what she said. Then she goes on, I will repeat what Father Lazarus told me once. In 1962, I went to the USA. That's what Father Lazarus told Mother Gavrila. I stayed there a long time and traveled to many states. So he continues, she's going back and forth. So now she's writing, he used to say, go anywhere you like, do whatever you like, as long as you observe fasting. Out of all things, prayer, liturgical life, that's very important, really important. The only sentence, one of the most important things he emphasized in the letter is, again, go anywhere you like, do whatever you like, as long as you observe fasting. And after reading this, I was really thinking about it, and then if you really fast, what it means is you're disciplining yourself, your body. Once you do that, when you think about it, everything comes by itself. Once you build it as an individual, you will know how to protect yourself because you humble yourself, you're fasting, you're praying more, and all this when you combine will really get you somewhere, would give a different perspective. You will know how to navigate yourself through all the tribulations that you will be going while fasting, any time of the year, but specifically through fasting. Because not a single arrow of the evil one can reach you when you fast. Never. That's how he ended up. So again, go anywhere you like, do whatever you like, as long as you observe fasting. Because not a single arrow of the evil one can reach you when you fast. Never. It's just unbelievable, unbelievable. Here I want to just remember now in my mind, there's a story I want to share with you. In Jordanville, where I went to school, upstate New York, in a monastery, in the 1970s, I believe, this is a story I heard, and it's oral tradition in the monastery, about temptations. When you live in a holy place, especially in a monastery, even in a parish, as we know, the temptations are much bigger, because, the liturgy has been served, we're trying to live the pious life, so the temptation much stronger. And there's one Holy Father from Greece, I believe, was visiting the monastery, and God opened his spiritual eyes that 3 miles before the monastery, he saw demons on the branches. The monastery is like 3 miles around, it's a huge property. So the demons were staying on the tree, a lot of demons, they were just non-stop, the arrows, throwing the arrows toward the monastery. Non-stop. He told this, that's what he saw. He came to the monastery, he told the Holy Fathers, Bishop Averki back at the time. And the way how they interpret this is another good thing we can learn, that how much the demons are attacking us, especially in the Holy, non-stop. And once in the seminar, I can tell stories, it doesn't take much just to explode. You're quiet, you're struggling, one little thing gonna slip, and then boom, something happens. And when I was in the seminary, and until today, I always have that in mind. I always think of those arrows, how just non-stop the demons are just throwing into us, throwing. For some reason, I will never forget that. And when I think of my difficulties or something that might become, or I should stumble on, it's good to have, sometimes, you come up with some things in your life that you hold yourself. It's important to build that in yourself. Like that pillar, that foundation, that when those tribulations come, you hold them, and you think of these things that will help you to get through. So I just thought to share with you. It was really interesting, especially when you fast. It's another thing in my life, believe it or not, there's every time, either before or during the fasting, always something happens to me, something like out of nowhere. Temptation, something big. Especially before the Great Lent, when I was in the seminary, and still 2 weeks before, or just beginning of the first week of the Great Lent, something. One time my car broke, it was a big bill, I had to pay $2,000. And back in New York, always something, at least for me. And now I expect, either before or when you think nothing's gonna happen, that's when it's gonna strike. So always I'm prepared, not prepared, but I'm expecting. And that's so good. Because Christian life is, we should be going against the current. Don't be afraid. So now I'm kind of used to it, so I expect, but I learn more how to humble myself, protect myself, so we don't make the same mistakes, or we learn how to become more stronger through fasting, through our prayer, and our spiritual life, so we can fight more. So we wouldn't allow those arrows get to us or damage us. So some people say, why to pray to God? He knows what is the best for us. Why don't you just leave it to him? The typical, not American, the modern, man, as would say. It's true. He does know what is best for us, and we don't know. But by praying, we're not so much making God agree with us, but through prayer, we're helped to make ourselves agree with God. Is that complicated? I'm going to repeat it again. But by praying, we're not so much making God agree with us, but through prayer, we're helped to make ourselves agree with God. God doesn't need us, we need God. Out of his love, he is for us, and he will never leave us. But we always think, this other things, we ought to go, when you think deeper into things just make so much sense. And this was another thing that I'm like, wow. Sometimes you discover things that just blows your mind away. Even for me, I'm still learning, and things make so much sense. The little things, like the current, this thing, just like little things, will just make you really open another world, another thing of how to really guide yourself and protect yourself, and helps you learn. There's another thing, Father Yanni, there's a priest back home. I talked to him, and he said he wrote something about the fast that I decided to put, for today's lecture, and really interesting points on the topic of why do we fast. This is the most frequently asked question. Why, especially non-Orthodox people, they'll say, why do you have to fast? Or they will say it's a diet. It's not about diet, obviously. So I'm not a priest again, and I'm not going to put myself into the position to tell you how to fast, but I will tell you what is the most important things to do during the fast or while fasting. If we have to find a spiritual father. It's really important. Really, that idea in America, it's, obedience, they always think you're a slave. When you think of humility, obedience, they think, you're just, you're like nobody. And that's unfortunate. They don't, but that's when you really, start to think, to look things from different perspective and humble yourself. When you have that humility, another world opens up to you. So having a spiritual father, not spiritual, confessor too, but spiritual father, it's really crucial when it comes especially to fasting, because he knows your spiritual state, and he's the one who would, based on your, on your abilities, he would tell you what is the best and how much you should fast, what you should do, what you should eat, what you should not. Without this guidance, we might end up improvising the fast as we like I said earlier. We fast as we want. Improvising, there's a danger. This is what the modern Christians would do, what the modernism, improvising, do whatever you want. Oh, it's okay, you can love God anywhere you are. No, that's not. You gotta follow one path. You cannot just go everywhere. To keep the prayer rule given by spiritual father, God doesn't expect from us to do all-night vigils. Everybody according to our own strengths, how much you can do. But that's why you tell him what you can do, what you've been doing, and he'll and that's really really important. Even for me, sometimes we're so tired, but that's what I used to do, and I still, especially when I work in the evening, I learned that mistake. I'll come 9-10, I'm so tired, and then when it's midnight, I get so lazy and tired that I'll say tomorrow, or I'll say I'm gonna wake up in 1 hour. I don't wake up. So what I started doing is, the first thing I come home, I either take a shower or I do my prayers right away, and then everything else, and it helps a lot. Even otherwise, you're tired and you get lazy. The first thing I wake up, I brush my teeth, my face, brush my teeth, and then say the prayers. You come from work, use it. 20 minutes is not gonna hurt you. It's a struggle. Sometimes it's hard. I know it's hard. It really. But if anything, something if you really can't, and I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just sharing what I'm doing. I'm not a spiritual father. Even if it's hard, just go out with the Jesus prayer, with the prayer rope, and just do it 20 minutes. Sometimes I would turn my alarm on, for 20 minutes, I would challenge myself. And even 20 minutes is hard. This is how spoiled we are. It's really, it's terrible. I'm terrible. I'm talking for myself. It's hard. But like I said, it's a process. So the prayer rule, it's important. Making peace with other people, with ourselves, and certainly in peace with God. So loving others is, and those who hate us, to make a peace with God, with ourselves in our heart, because your conscience, will tell you, when you're wrong, when you're right. So that's another thing that we have to keep in mind while we are fasting. Anytime, but particularly at least those periods are the opportunity. Father Tadeusz said, on Sunday, that this is the time for us to think of ourselves, to go deep in our heart, to those. And it's really important, to reconcile with God, ourselves, love, those who doesn't love us. That's the hardest, but even everybody, certainly. The food by itself will not make you dirty, but the hatred and other things that we do to each other. So, again, it's not what comes inside will make us dirty, what comes from our mouth. So fasting with our mouth, it's hard. Like St. Apostle John writes in his epistles, you cannot say good and bad at the same time from your mouth. You have to really, choose one. We cannot sit in 2 chairs at the same time. You got to choose one. Otherwise, it's dangerous. It's really dangerous. You cannot be everywhere. Choose one and stay. Because he did one. He chose one path to follow his father. Mother of God was the same. And I think, the saints, I think when I think of that, I think of them, and those are the greatest examples we can have. The greatest. Everything just given to us. Everything. To keep the peace in the family. The temptations, especially the biggest temptations, come within. Like Father Tadeusz said in one of the sermons, the heresy comes within the church, not out of the church. So those are things that we have to work on. And again, it's hard, but we have to do our best. God knows our hearts. Sometimes you cannot change. We shouldn't. If you see it doesn't work, we change them with love, with prayer. People that we cannot change. Like what I do prostrations. People that or somebody if asks me really to pray for them, if anything I can do besides praying, at least do one prostration. That's what I do. Again, doesn't mean you have to do the same. And then God knows the rest. So He knows our hearts, and abstinence in a marriage during fasting. you're familiar with that. Another really important things about how do we fast that I would like to emphasize is, I will start with the question first. What is the royal road of moderation? Neither too much, not too little. So moderation, moderation, moderation. When, like I said, if we learn to be moderate in food, we will be moderate in other things and situations. So simple. Even when I read it, this was Father Yanni again. Like why? Like how did I even think about it? Just if you simple thing, you learn how to be moderate in food. I mean, it's really think of these things and try to apply the same within everything. Things that you go through different situations, but moderation is really, it's just another key point. How do we fast? Not to eat each other. Let us not eat among ourselves. Let us not judge anyone, because where there is a condemnation, there's no blessing from God. I got scared when I read that. I read it because I judge. Sometimes you don't think about it. Especially back home we gossip a lot. If anything, in America people don't gossip. I love that. Back home we gossip a lot. Nothing else but gossiping. But over here, just reading this, let us not judge anyone, because where there's condemnation, it's so, there's no blessing. The grace just leaves us. I don't know, I found myself into this, I have to admit. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. At last, fasting is not fast by itself, but only a tool for our spiritual and physical purification. Through fasting, prayers, and repentance, we're purified and united with the body and blood of Christ at the Holy Liturgy. Without communion, fasting becomes purposeless, no purpose. And again, in the first lecture when I was introducing myself, I did mention that these are the tools, very important tools that we have. That's why the Protestant will say, why go to church, why you fast, why you cross, because these are things that God gave to us. So you're learning. When you go in a workshop, I did go one time to Pulse, so I saw those machines, I think of those machines. So to know how to operate the big machines, you cannot just go and do it. You have to go to school, you have to learn, otherwise you're gonna ruin everything. So you learn how to use what you're about to otherwise, it's gonna be disaster. So this is a tool, or tools that, especially, speaking of the fast, that God has given to us, I think the biggest one, with the prayer and the fasting, that how we can guide and protect ourselves. And again, the point that in the end is, united with the body and blood of Christ at the Holy Liturgy. That's the whole point. This is where we're going, towards there. We're not going left, right, back. We're going to the communion. This is our sanctuary. We love everything, the holy relics, the icons, everything around. But this is essential. This is why we love Christ. This is why we are Orthodox Christian. This is uniting with Christ. That's the biggest of the biggest. The very big thing you can, in our main focus. What benefit do we get from fasting? So this is something I find from Archimandrite Simeon Koukas. He starts with the same basis of the Great. He calls fasting a cure for sin. With other words, fasting is a medicine that removes the sin at its roots. Really, really interesting how St. Basil, he's very good. There's a book I believe about fasting where he really dedicated himself on that. Fasting not only calms the body movements, at the same time it frees a person from mental passions. According to St. John Chrysostom, drunkenness and moderation enslave us to the passions, while fasting frees us from their snackles, frees us from torment, and leads us to the freedom for which we're created. So just like people who, we all struggle from something, but really good comparison that with those passions versus through fasting, how it's leading us to that freedom that will take us from for which we were created. That is why fasting is rightly called passion killer. Again, that is why fasting is rightly called passion killer and medicine that cleanses from passions. Beautiful, really. I don't know. I love it. I'm learning too. Again, It's beautiful. Many of the fathers of the church, in support of their teachings about the fast, cite the examples of the two great prophets, which is Moses and Elijah. St. John Chrysostom says, I'm quoting him, after 40 days of fasting, the great Moses was honored to receive the tablets of the law. So we know the Old Testament even comes from the paradise, from Adam and Eve, but even going through the Old Testament, everybody had to fast. So before something big, even before the moving of the
ark.
The ark, thank you. The ark, people were fasting. Before the consecration of the temple, people were fasting. Before something happened, they would fast. So it's nothing a new thing. So I'm gonna just pause here. Then again, I'm connecting like somebody back in the world, like or the Protestants. You know, tell me, why do you have to fast? How can you even deny? You're Christian, you believe only in the Bible. Well, here you are, it's in the Bible. So this is what I don't get upset, but I get frustrated. I don't know why. Like, why it's so hard to understand? It's because we like to make our own faith. We like to understand God as we want or as things are. This is the problem. Honestly, the more I grow up, the more I realize how spoiled we are and how we like to negotiate with God and make things in our own way, not in His own way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the problem. This is where the biggest problem we have nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm realizing that every day more and more. And that's why when I talk to people, I'm very strict. No, we're a problem. Because of this, what I just said. It is a problem. I mean, when you think about it, sorry, but you can hate me, but it's a reality. It's a reality. So again, after 40 days of fasting, the great Moses was honored to receive the tablets of the law. The same can be said of the prophet Elijah. Basil the Great writes, fasting made Elijah to see clearly the great vision. You know, the vision of the angels when the angel gave him the charcoal and cleaned him, and he saw one of the biggest vision, God, you know, the throne of God. So the great vision, for after he had purified his soul by fasting for 40 days, he was worthy to see the Lord in the cave of Horeb, as far as one can see. So he was fasting, and so, like I said earlier, so we are preparing, we're waiting, and boom, you know, this is the fruit of what you've been fasting. Rejoice, the Pascha is here, the feast is here. That's why, for me, one of the biggest, speaking of food, is after Pascha, I love to break the fast with milk. I love milk and cheese in my favorite. I'm so excited. The first thing I do, even in Jordan, I would buy cheese. And this is, I love it. I'm so excited. I love to eat. That's another thing. But when I break the fast, you have that from the physical point of view, not spiritual. It's so like, it feels so good. So this is another thing, fasting. And look, he saw one of the biggest things, so we have so many examples. Another example I would like to give you, speaking of fasting, it's about, the fool of Christ. Back in the history, we have people who are foolish for Christ. People think they're crazy, but they're for Christ. And we have the Blessed Nicholas. This is in Russia. So Blessed Nicholas ran through the streets of Pskov. There's a Pskov monastery in Russia, very old monastery, and there's a city there, pretending to be foolish, denouncing to people their secrets, sins, and prophesying future events. As some of you might have read what they do. Maybe they are half naked or they do crazy things and just go, you did this, you did that. So it's a wake-up call. That's main their characteristics of their holiness. Just pretending they're crazy, and out of nowhere they'll tell you something that you just wow. So he was one of those. So when the Tsar Ivan the Terrible, the Terrible Ivan, it's one of the, some of you about him, the Russian emperor entered Pskov. He was visiting. All the people were terrified. So this is how much they were scared from him. They did not like him because of his actions. That in honor of his appearance, they made the bread and salt, but they didn't even go out. They would put the bread outside. They went back to their houses. When he was passing by, they did not even want to be outside. But so in front of each house, there's a table with the bread and salt. But people did not go out, like I said. When the mayor, or back then the person who was in charge of the whole city, he had to greet him. He did not have a choice, so he had a salt and a bread in front of the church and greeted him. So he came and he just knocked down, he threw away the bread and the salt. This is how terrible he was. So then the blessed Nicholas, or the foolish for Christ, comes out of nowhere, appears before the emperor in the long village shirt, tied with a rope, jumping on a stick like a little child, doing crazy things like a child, and shouted, Ivan, eat bread and salt, not human blood. That's all he said. And he ran away. Somehow, the guards or the soldiers were going after him. He ran away. He just eat bread and salt, not human blood. That's all he said. So then the emperor learns who this guy is, and he decides to go to his cell to visit him. And by the way, that was in the first week of the Great Lent, when Ivan the Terrible visited the Pskov, the city of Pskov. When he heard that the emperor was coming to visit him, the foolish Nicholas, or Christ, Saint Nicholas took a piece of bloody meat. And when the emperor entered his cell, after bowing down, so he made a bow, down to the ground, to the ruler, and he offered the meat, and he told him, "Eat, Ivan, eat the meat." So he didn't have a bread or salt, but the meat. Eat this meat. I love this story. The terrible king angrily replied, "I'm a Christian, and I do not eat meat in fasting." Then the man of God answered him in a very sweet voice, "Yes, but you do the worst. You eat human flesh and blood, forgetting not only fasting, but also God." Wow. You do the worst. You eat human flesh and blood, forgetting not only fasting, but also God. This lesson really penetrated deeper into the heart of Ivan, and he did not. He was defeated by his actions. That he was about to destroy the city. That was his intention. And just the one prayer and the foolish for Christ, these actions saved the city. It's a beautiful monastery today. It's a book of Everyday Saints. There's the monk, I think he's a bishop of Tikhon. He lived there, and there's so wonderful stories that happened in the past. So, speaking of the fast, eating, I think it's a wonderful story that I wanted just to connect, to relate to fasting. What the Holy Fathers say about fasting? St. Basil the Great writes the following: "Because we did not fast, that is why we're expelled from paradise. That is why we need to fast in return to heaven." Wow. I mean, so many reasons, why? You have a lot of reasons. And this is one of the biggest ones. We're expelled because we broke the obedience of the fast. You want to get back? You have the opportunity. Fast. Come. Like the prodigal son. He's waiting for us. And again, the more I grow up, the more I learn how terrible I am and how still God is waiting. For me, I cannot point a finger to anybody, but speaking for my own sins. And He waits and waits. And all it takes just to wake up and to follow His commandment. I don't know. God is very merciful. I don't think we can understand really His mercy. We sing, "Your mercy endureth forever" in Psalm 135. But I don't think we really understand. I don't. For my own actions, my own life, what I'm doing, Also, the Saint Basil, there's another quote or saying that I wanted to share with you. This is what he writes: "Fasting protects children, makes young people chaste, gives honor to the old, because white hair adorned with fasting is worthy of respect. Fasting is the most appropriate ornament for woman, a bridle in the bloom of youth, a guardian of marriage." That's beautiful too. "A guardian of children. Fasting provides such services to every home. And how does He regulate our life in society?" Speaking of the fast, how does that apply in a society? "He immediately leads the whole city and whole nation to good deeds." The fast, again, the fasting. "Comes the criticism, comes the discord, silence the rebukes." It's sweet. Not only, but when you think about it, it's so sweet. Once it comes into you, it does, you know, it's a miracle. It does miracles. It really does. It transforms us. This is the biggest miracle, going back to Christ through all this. This is the biggest, it is a miracle, really, going back to Him, through the Holy Communion. If everyone had Him as a counselor, the fast, regarding his deeds, then nothing would disturb the deep peace that will reign everywhere. Then our life would not be full of tears and full of despair. Oh, that's beautiful. If fasting were the main guide of our life, so again, then our life would be not full of tears and full of despair if fasting were the main guide of our life. Why so hard? Again, why? I don't know. I think it's a beautiful quote. Because as it is obvious, He would teach everyone not only to abstain from food, but also to be perfectly distant and alienated from avarice or greed and every vice. This is just, it's amazing. These two quotes, and again, this is why we need that spiritual support. This even, not lecture, just talking about different topics. We remind us how far we might have gone, where we are, where we have to be. And these are the pillars, again, that are holding. Imagine you take this pillar, one from the church, something's going to fall off. These are holding the whole building. So we need those that are holding us, are holding our faith, our life. And just to wrap up, to finish up, like I said, I wasn't going to talk about the chronological, historical part, but just general about fasting, with some quotes and different holy fathers, what they talk about. But I do want to just mention, have you ever wondered, probably you would know, why do we fast on Wednesdays and Fridays throughout the year, with exceptions to Bright Week and Nativity to the Theophany? The reason why is because on Wednesday, Christ was betrayed from Judas. So this is our sacrifice that we fast for that, and we're trying not to be betrayed and with our own sins. And Friday, of course, because of the crucifixion, and His death. Those are the two reasons why we do every single Wednesday and Friday. And just one of my favorite topics that I would like you to think about, that's another pillar of mine that I'm holding myself, is this about the suffering of Christ. Above my bed, that's one of my favorite icons are the Christ, the bridegroom, like suffering. That's every time I look at that icon, it reminds me how terrible I am, how sinful, and what Christ did for us. And when you think about just the sufferings, what He did for us, for me, this is for me the biggest thing that helps me to even more understand my fallen nature and how terrible I am. And it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful to think about it, and just to try to humble yourself and it's really, I think it's important because He had to do that for us, and it was terrible. It's beyond my understanding, at least. So that's the reason why we fast on every Wednesday and Friday. And just one more thing, I want to say on fasting is the three important things. You can relate to the fast is pray, fast, give. They're all connected. Prayer, fasting is helping you to become more, fervent into the prayer, along with the giving. Those three things I really think are the key. That when you apply, especially during the fasting periods, it's going to teach us a lot. It's going to really make us who we are, who we should be, and how far, again, we might or are from Christ, and and to get back. So again, when you think of the fasting, I feel like it's like a mother telling you, come to me, I'm here for you. Just like the Mother of God is here for us. The fasting is just so sweet that, it's just taking us, bringing us towards God. And food is just one little component, as we all know. Food doesn't kill you. It's important, but it's more than that. And I'm the last person to talk about the fasting, because I do fast with food, but other things, there's so much I have to learn. And only by the grace of God, by His mercy, and by our little effort that at least we try every day. So only to Him. So that's all I had to share, with you. Forgive me if I said something wrong. That's
Thank you.
So, Father,
Thank you very
please.
much. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Amen.
Just a couple, I'm enjoying these classes because I can come unprepared, and Stoyan presents, a wonderful basic presentation, and then it brings to mind things for me, things that are important to myself or important for you to know. And one of the things, just a couple tidbits about fasting. First of all, on a very practical level, it is important to realize that it is more difficult now to fast in many different ways, and some of them very practical. When we look at the history of fasting, we see that the categories of fasting, foods that we give up, and so the first thing we give up is meat. The second thing we give up is dairy, eggs and dairy and things, and then we give up fish, and then we give up wine and oil, and then we have just what we would call like veganism or something. There's actually another category under there called xerophagy, where you live on bread and water. But in the old days, over time, the saints of the church discovered that in God's providence, those categories of fasting also, we are giving up the foods that impassion the body, or make the body energized and activated more. And so when we eat a very rich diet, it makes the body more strong in the sense of not health, but in the passions. When I've had a lot of fat and protein and sugar, my body is actually more prone to the passions. When I weaken my body, which is very contrary to, I think, the contemporary idea of what we should do with our body, when we weaken it, it subdues more. It submits to the soul more when it's weak or tired. But also, it's good to remember that in the very beginning, the fasting categories were based on getting away from the way that only rich people could eat and getting down to the way that the poor people ate. And so in the ancient days, very few people could afford to regularly eat meat. You have to just remember that. You milked your cow, you milked your goat. You didn't just go out and eat it because you wanted a steak. It was very few people who could actually afford to eat meat on a regular basis. So that goes first because it's the most wealthy. Remember in all the stories of the fatted calf, right? They have a special cow that they're going to eat, and they're fattening it up, and it doesn't exercise much because they want it to be tender. And then they're waiting for a very, very special occasion to slaughter that animal and eat it. Another thing practically to remember is you didn't have refrigerators, you didn't have ice. You couldn't kill a 1,500-pound animal and then just put it in the freezer and eat it over time. So they ate very different than we did. And so you have these categories that people give up, where very few people were able to eat meat all of the time. It was a delicacy. Then the majority of the people had things like cheese and dairy products, eggs. Then everyone had a garden. The least that you had was a garden where you're eating vegetables from it. And so we have these categories going down from eating in a wealthy manner down to a very simple manner. A lot of people don't know it, but in the last category of fasting, where we would call it vegetarian typically, that actually, technically, although we don't do this regularly, and I'll explain why, but reptiles and amphibians are in that category. You could always eat snakes and lizards and turtles, because along with seafood, shrimp, crab, things like that, because that is what the poorest of the poor people were doing. If you didn't even have a garden where you could get your vegetables from, you would be out scrounging on the seashore for shellfish or the things that you would find in a tide pool, or you would literally be chasing lizards or snakes around trying to kill them and eat them. And so it was according to that, that level of richness, from richness to poverty. It's very interesting on the theme of swimming upstream. That dietary schedule, if you just look at the food, is completely upside down now. The very cheapest thing you can possibly buy for the calories is beef at McDonald's or at Burger King. You know, for $1, you get a hamburger. It's not a very good one, but it's the cheapest. What drives fast food in America particularly is poverty. You can get more food, more calories at fast food for most calories for the $1 than you can anywhere else. And then, you get down to, dairy and things are there in the middle. And now, some of the most expensive thing you could possibly buy is organic vegetables, right? Go to the store. It's very expensive these days to go to the store and, to go to somewhere like, Wild Roots down here on the road and buy organic, good vegetables. It's one of the most expensive things you could spend. And then if you wanted to go to a restaurant and get some very fancy lizard, right, or snake or turtle, right, you're at some exotic restaurant paying $100 per plate. It's completely reversed. And so it's important for us to know that. Economically, in the old days, it was very affordable to fast, because when you started fasting, your chickens didn't stop laying eggs. Your garden continued to grow. You still had to milk your cow or your goat. And so it was very easy then to also have alms to give. You could easily give food away to the poor because your food resources were continuing to produce food. And so it was much more natural in the agrarian world to keep the fast. And I think that's important to point out, because when God gave us these rules, it was very compatible with mankind at the time. So keep that in mind. Remember also, last week we talked about the spiritual life is rooted in reversing the effects of the fall. Reversing the effects of the fall. God creates a man in the Garden of Eden. From the man comes a woman. Then through a tree, death comes into the world. And then we talked about the Theotokos. Then God chooses a woman, and from that woman comes a man, and through the tree of the cross, life comes back into the world. He literally is reversing effects of the fall. And so theologically, we fast because Adam and Eve didn't, which Stoyan mentioned. End of discussion, right? In a sense. God gave them a rule for salvation, and they didn't keep it. We often will say Adam and Eve, the only two sins we know for sure Adam and Eve committed was they disobeyed and they didn't repent. Don't eat of the tree, and they did. And then when God said, what happened? They didn't say, we ate from the tree, forgive us. What if they had, I always say. Instead, it's, well, you gave me the woman. No, he, right? No repentance. So we Adam and Eve made the mistake of eating in a manner that God did not bless, and then not repenting. And so we practice literally eating in a manner that God blesses and repenting. We do the opposite of what they did. And it's not because they sinned and God's mad at us, so he wants us to do what they didn't do. That is not the Orthodox Church. They, through particular sins, brought the fall into the world, and so we are by very particular virtues, the equal and opposite virtues, it's not equal and opposite, but it would seem that way. It's the triumphant and holy virtues. We overcome the sins that they committed. And so remember that. I always like to, when people say, why do we fast though? Why do we fast as Christians? Because the Adam and Eve theology is a part of the rich tradition, the apostolic tradition of the church. Scripturally, why do we fast? And I always love to say, I have a list at home that I should have brought, and it's the ifs and the whens of Christ. Right? And you get this list when you read through Scripture where Christ will say things like, if you forgive your brother, God will forgive you also. What's that called in math? It's like a proof or a if then, things. if you do this, then this will happen. But when it comes to fasting along with prayer, he doesn't say if you pray or if you fast. He says when. When you fast, do it this way. When you pray, do it this way. And so as Stoyan pointed out too, if we are a student of Scripture, we ought to be, and my father was among these people years ago, who wondered what was he supposed to do? Because it doesn't say it's optional. It says you do it. If you're a follower of me, you fast and you pray. So that's the scriptural root of fasting there. And just the last thing to remember is that, and this is how I explain it to the children, that when we fast, we are strengthening the spiritual muscle, the little muscle that allows us to say no to evil desires. And so, like with the kids, I always talk about, when you put the plate of cookies on the table and your parents tell you don't eat any of them, which is torture, right? I do like to tell them, with the tree in the Garden of Eden, by the way, God did not put the tree there and tell them, I'm putting it in your midst like a platter of fresh chocolate chip cookies, and you can never eat them. That's torture. That's a sin in itself, right? It's when, and when we really study Genesis, we find out that they were going to eat of that tree. There was a time where they were going to become mature enough to be able to handle knowing everything from good to evil, which is a part of theosis. It's a part of being like God, that you know everything between good and evil. So anyways, but when we exercise, when we put that platter of cookies on the table and our parents tell us don't eat it until after dinner, the spiritual exercise of desiring something and telling yourself that you're not going to do it is the exact same function of the will and the soul to say no to evil. Because when sin comes along, I can admit I want to do it. It's, do I choose to do it or not? It can be a temptation for me. Nothing's a temptation if we don't secretly want to do it. That's not a temptation. Terrible sins can come along that are repulsive to us. It's very easy to turn them down. It's when the things come along that we actually secretly are attracted to or want to do them. And literally when it is Wednesday or Friday or one of the fasting periods or in the nativity fast like we are now, by wanting to have a cheeseburger and not doing it, you are literally exercising the muscle that allows you that then when a passion comes along or a temptation or a sin comes along, that you literally you're using the same spiritual muscle to say, well, I want to get angry just like I want to eat the hamburger, but I'm not going to. Right? I want to steal or I want to lie, but I'm not going to. I'm choosing to do something other than what I desire. And so ultimately we get down to one of the powers of the soul is desire. And just like Eve just looked at the fruit on the tree and saw that it was good to eat. It was beautiful and it was good to eat. She longed for it. And she didn't have or didn't choose to use that strength to say, I do long for it, but I'm not going to have it. And we gain that strength and we practice using that strength through keeping the fast. So reversing the fall, building the spiritual muscle that allows us to say no to sin, and also just remembering that it is more difficult to do these days. But when we do something that is difficult, when we swim upstream, God gives us greater grace. And so by passing up Burger King, it's actually maybe a greater grace-evoking act than a greater fasting feat would have been 1,000 years ago. Any questions about fasting? You're all hungry for a